So it is with great pleasure that I introduce our next speaker, Vangelis Kourlitis, who is speaking on the scientific Python ecosystems and how they help us answer fundamental questions of the universe.
So hi everyone, I'm Vangelis, as I've been introduced, and I'm here to tell you exactly this, how the scientific Python ecosystem is used in fundamental particle physics research. I'm here from CERN in Geneva, along with a couple of colleagues in the crowd, Gordon, Matthew, Alex is not here. And today, this is going to be like, I want to put this disclaimer here. So this is partially a presentation and partially a demonstration. So the aim is to showcase the libraries of the scientific Python ecosystem that we use for fundamental research in particle physics. And what is the big news for us that I am here to tell as well, that we recently released a significant amount of our data that we collect at CERN, open data for research. And we hope that scientists can look at this data, especially computer scientists in this crowd, and then we hope to have a constructive discussion and dialogue, and get something nice out of this. And Atlas scientists can do some work, but they cannot do everything. That's why we release this data. So that's why we put this presentation demonstration here. So this is a notebook that I will keep going and execute cells. So I will really show you how you can grab this open data and how you can use scientific Python libraries to do a simplified analysis of this data. And then the rest of this, it's yours, and there is no end. So what is the LHC and the Atlas experiments? Let's set a little bit the stage of what I'm going to talk about here. So the Atlas experiment at CERN, what it's doing is to analyze vast amounts of particle physics data. And our absolute target is to answer very fundamental questions about the universe. Maybe you have heard about dark matter, right? What dark matter is and how dark matter is produced, or some more like mysterious questions as about extra dimensions in our universe, or additional fundamental particles and maybe forces that we haven't found so far. And another big question is about antimatter asymmetry in our universe. Whatever we see around is made of matter, and we don't really know why it's not made from antimatter. So these are some of the really basic questions that we want to answer, and that's why we make these experiments at the LHC in the Atlas experiment. So what is the LHC? A little bit to tell you this. I hope it's not so blurry. So the LHC, it's a particle accelerator. It's a circular particle accelerator. It's located in Geneva in Switzerland. It's about 100 meters underground, and it's a huge circular machine, 27 kilometers in circumference. And what this machine is doing is to accelerate particles that are called protons and bring them into collision. And based on this very basic equation that equates energy and matter, when you give a lot of energy, you can get out a lot of matter, roughly. So what we want to do is accelerate protons, bring them into collision, and this energy that we give comes up as new particles, new matter. And maybe like this, we can produce some of the unknown things on the universe, like dark matter, or some more exotic particles, or some stuff that I'll show you today that we haven't seen before and we're able to understand with the LHC. So to give some numbers a little bit about the complexity of these experiments, some of these are very much detailed, but maybe it's worth telling you that, okay, as I said, it's a circular collider. Inside this collider, there are two tracks that bring protons, accelerate protons, and bring them into collision. And there are actually 40 million collisions happening per second, right? It's very, very high frequency experiment. So these collisions that are called events, I'm going to call it events for the rest of the talk. So these events, 40 million per second, and actually it's not just proton and proton, it's usually bunches of protons with bunches of protons. And these collide, and we have in every of these 40 million interactions per second, we have about 25 or 30 protons crossing each other. So it's a very dense environment there, and a lot of data rate, and that's why you need like sophisticated analytics to do this thing. And the other tricky thing, okay, you collide the bunches, you collide the protons inside the bounces, a lot of energy and new particles, new matter coming out. And maybe, as I said, this new matter can be like something that we haven't seen before. Dark matter, supersymmetry, Higgs, maybe that's one of these things. But what to keep in mind is that only very rarely something interesting coming up. So we have an example here, only one interesting event in 10 to the 13 kind of collision. So you need a lot of like high frequency kind of decision making in order to be able to discriminate one of the interesting things. So all of this complicates our data infrastructure, and that's why we have like this big amount of complicated data. So if I zoom out, how this looks like a little bit from further up the sky, that's the LHC ring, where the protons accelerate and they gain energy. And then we have 4 interaction points. And in these interaction points, we bring in protons into collision to make new particles, new matter. This is the Franco-Swiss borders. That's CERN. My home is about here in France. And this is the ATLAS experiment, what I'm working on with my colleagues. This is one of the 4 experiments that are happening there. So the ATLAS experiment, it's what we call a particle physics detector. I don't need to show the words again, I can just tell you. So it's a particle physics detector, and it's huge, right? It's 44 meters length and 25 meters high. It's like a cube. But it's a complicated machine that has a lot of sub-detectors inside. And every sub-detector is made to register signatures of particular particles. It's not all the particles leave the same signature into the detector, so when the protons collide, new particles are created, they fly through the detector, but different particles leave different kind of signatures inside the detector. That's why we need a lot of all of these weird called things, calorimeter, pixel detector, semiconductor tracker. So we don't need to go into the details, but every sub-component of the whole ATLAS experiment is made to detect particular signatures of particular particles. Okay, so you can see this a little bit in a transverse view. If I cut the detector, if I cut a slice of the detector, then I have maybe a better idea how this look like. The collision is happening in the center, protons come collide, new particles produced, and then they fly out to the detector. And then you can see, like, for example, electron, maybe that's a particle that probably all you have heard about. It has this particular signature, and it's actually used what is called the electromagnetic calorimeter, right? And some other particles, like the proton, is actually depositing its energy, leaving a signature and depositing its energy in what is called hadronic calorimeter. Some other particles called muons, they actually use what is called the muon spectrometer. So we have various signals from various sub-detectors, and our job is actually to take this signal collectively and do what we call particle reconstruction. So we reconstruct, we combine, we process these signals, and then we reconstruct particle objects, and then we can study these particle objects. So going a little bit into how the data look like. So as I said, we reconstruct these particle objects. There is a lot of data processing and data reduction steps, but at the end of the day, we have a data format that we call FISLIGHT. And that's the main data format that we're going to try to analyze today, and also what we released. So inside this FISLIGHT file, the data are very highly structured and maybe can represent it in a tabular format. However, there is a peculiarity there. As I said, we have many events, right? Many collisions, many events, and not the same things happen in each event. Maybe you have an event where you have 1 electron. Then maybe you have another event where you have 2 electrons. Maybe you have another event where you have no electrons. So this, if I put it in a table, this will be what is called a jagged kind of table. And then we gave actually a tutorial about the jagged data that was 2 days ago. It's called Thinking in Arrays. So, if you're interested more about these arbitrary data structures, you can follow this. And I have this example here. How I would write this in Python, right? I would have a table that each row here, let's say, represents one of the collision event. And in the first row, I have 3 elements. Let's say 3 electrons are produced with properties X, Y, Z. In the second event, there are no electrons produced. In the third event, maybe 2. And then if I execute this thing, you see I can use this library called awkward, right, which is what we actually demonstrated in our tutorial. And this library can actually provide NumPy idioms to do operations on these jagged data structures. And then we can put in a data frame, let's say, and it will look like this. So this is how generally the data would look like inside the PhysLight file in general particle physics data. What is well defined, okay, the number of particles and the number of elements in each row, in each event is not defined. We don't know exactly what it comes. It's what we measure every time. But we know well what properties of the data we measure and we store. And we actually, if you follow this link, you'll find like kind of huge tables of properties of data that we store inside these PhysLight files. And this is fixed, right? You know the properties of the data that you're going to store inside. So I want to move on a little bit and tell you about, okay, now that you know a little bit more about the data, tell you about our open data release. And this is actually happened last week or something. We released about 65 of terabytes of this PhysLight data for research. And this is over 7 billion LHC collision events. And these are real data that we collected during 2015 and 2016 at CERN in Geneva. And of course, we provide the real data, and we provide some simulated data as well. You know, a lot of times you need to play with simulated data before. And simulated data and real data in terms of structure and variables and stuff, they look almost the same. Today we're going to use the simulated data to make the practical things and not analyze 65 terabytes of data. You can find a lot of our open data release in these links. We have a portal, an open data portal, where there are a lot of documentation, tutorials, and that's one of the first, I think, times that we saw this sort of notebooks and demonstration outside of Atlas. So yeah, I'm pretty glad about that. So if you get this PhysLight file, you go to the open data repository, you download, let's say, one of these PhysLight file, and then you need to read it somehow. So these PhysLight files are actually the type of root files. Root is a very, very common kind of data file that we use in particle physics. And it needs very specialized sort of decompression, deserialization, interpretation routines. And this we used to be in like old school C++ software. But there is a Python library made up for that. It's called uproot. So with the library uproot, you can read actually seamlessly these PhysLight data files. And these are the two libraries that you actually need, right? You need the library uproot to take this data and load it into memory, and then you need an in-memory representation that awkward is giving you. So if you have these two libraries, actually you can do the whole the whole analysis. But to make this life easier, to make our life easier, we use another library that's called Coffee. This Coffee provides like wrappers and tools on top of awkward and uproot. And this is stuff that physicists usually need and without need to code too much. So our today demonstration is going to use Coffee. So I'm going to import Coffee and NumPy that is going to be used for some things. And just before I dive and open one of these files, I'll give you just an example of what this file what physics data will have inside, right? So today we're going to look at the case of the famous Higgs boson and demonstrate the search for the Higgs boson. That's a new particle that discovered in 2012. So yeah, got a Nobel Prize. So the Higgs boson is a prediction of a mechanism called Brute-Englert Higgs mechanism. These mechanisms explain how the matter acquires mass actually in the universe. And for 50 years, this mechanism is a theoretical mechanism that predicted the new particle. This particle was discovered in 2012, and in 2013, the Nobel Prize were awarded to Francois Englert and Peter Higgs for this discovery. So today we'll actually try to show you how this was done in a simplified version, actually. So a little bit of physics now. Maybe you don't need to go. We don't need to go into very much detail, but that's very famous pictures that we use in physics called Feynman diagrams. So a Higgs boson a Higgs boson is produced, right, in the LHC collision, but the Higgs boson decays very rapidly. It decays like to another particles called Z bosons, and Z bosons decay very rapidly as well. So at the end of the day, in the detector, you see very final state particles after the Higgs boson decay. You have the Z boson decay, and then we're going to look for what is called electrons. So Z bosons can decay to electrons as well. So that's the only thing you can measure, actually, electrons. And then you need to go back and figure out properties of the Higgs boson, but because these are very fast decaying, you cannot see them. You can only see electrons. So, and that's a picture of a real, actually, event of a Higgs boson production. You can see, actually, this red and blue, they show the electrons that came up from the Higgs production, and that's a real picture that Atlas registered in 2012 and got into, helped the discovery. Okay, now that you know a few things, what I'm going to look at, I need to look for electrons to figure out properties of the Higgs boson. You can download this file from, let's say, this open data. You can load it either locally, you can stream it. I'm going to use a service called XCAS just to save some time for that we have in our compute facility. And then, you know, you can use Coffee's Nano Events Factory. This is a way that, as I said, Coffee provides some wrappers to load files and so on. I'll give a filter just to load some properties, only the properties I want. I don't want to load all the file because it will take ages. Just the properties I want, and then I can load this thing with Coffee. You can have a brief look of what this highly structured jagged data looks like. So my events will have stuff like electrons and muons inside and some other information. Coffee is using a Dask backend, so it's doing lazy computation until I click compute, where it's going to actually look at the data. And then you can see that it will have this kind of weird structure, like sometimes I have electrons, sometimes I don't have electrons, sometimes I have multiple electrons. And then it's very highly structured because even electrons have like deeper level of nesting, and they have properties and so on. That's why I'm talking about like a very complex data structure with a lot of nesting levels. So what you want to do then is you can do some data selection and what we call feature engineering. So as I said, Higgs decays to Z boson decays to electrons. Z boson can decay to muons as well. So, but I don't want to look at this now. So I want to write some function to filter out the muons. Simple as that. And then, as I said to you, I need 4 electrons, exactly 4 electrons, if you remember this picture. So I can write some Python functions to do this thing, like data selection, particle selection, and filtering. And then what I need to do, I need to infer, to go back a little bit in time, and from the electrons, infer back the properties of the Higgs boson. The property of the Higgs boson that we are interested in is the mass, right? We call it invariant mass for some reasons that we can ask me later. And we wrote also a function to calculate the invariant mass. So we have a function that is doing this object selection. It will take the events, and then for electrons, I will say, okay, I need these electrons to be that good quality, to be this amount of energy. The details here are not important, but it's important to understand that, you know, how you can select a little bit, how you can do data selection. And then later on, I will pass these electrons and muons inside my region. I will say, okay, I want exactly 4 electrons. I'll count them with awkward. And then I want exactly 0 muons. I want events with only 4 electrons and 0 muons. And then I can calculate this invariant mass, which will gonna be the inferred mass of the Higgs boson from the electrons. Yeah, I don't want to go into very much detail just to propagate further, but we can discuss this later. And then, okay, I can execute the cell, and then I can actually do this object and event selection. I feed inside the events the electrons, and then I select this region. So, as I said, Coffee is a lazy execution mechanism, employs Dask with a lazy execution mechanism. So behind the scenes is building a computational graph, and then before I execute it, I can visualize it. So that's a huge graph, but you can see what it's actually going to do. It's going to open the uproot file, get the Fizzlight file with uproot, get electrons muon, apply the criteria I selected, and then apply the selection. All of this graph is actually, describing what I said, and then Dask can actually optimize this thing so it can make it even more compact when it's going to run it. And if I'm going to run it, I'll take matplotlib, I'll calculate my invariant masses, the masses of the Higgs boson. Now I need the compute call. I can calculate the mean, and then I can plot this thing, and then hopefully you'll see a histogram. Yeah, now you will see this histogram. So I took my events, I applied the selection, I applied the object selection, and I put in a histogram. And that's how I can do this. So we have another block of our notebook, which is, okay, now I just analyze a single file, but how I can scale up this to multiple files? I'm talking about 65 terabytes of data, right? So Coffee, as I said, provides this Dask backend, so I can take advantage of it and actually make a computational graph that I can distribute to different compute nodes. I have the code here. You need to write some kind of, boilerplate code to define your files and define some metadata into the files. We provide a table with metadata in our open data portal. And as I said, we don't need to go to understand the details now of this, but the idea is to get that, you have this task graph. And another point here that it has to do with big data processing is that, okay, if I have like arrays of millions or billions like flying around my cluster, probably that's not a good idea, so I need a bit more compact representation to deliver back of my workers. And what we do is like histograms, right? Histogram is like very fun thing to store huge amounts of data. So I'll just add another piece of my computational graph and make a histogram. So I will return histograms back from my compute nodes. The good thing here is that you don't, you will read some metadata, but the cool thing is that you don't need to change much your analysis code. It stays the same, and then you can distribute everywhere, and you can fill your histograms in a distributed way, and you can make this task graph with Coffee. You see now we processed, the task graph is ready to get processed, and this will take just 1 minute. This will analyze like about 1.5 million of events of kind of 11 gigabytes of data set. And as we talk, this should come up, and that's a sort of a lazy evaluation of these histograms across multiple files in our kind of compute platform. Hopefully this will come. As I said, the measure usually takes 50 seconds, and maybe I'm very positive it will come back. So what until this processing, what I can say is that at this moment to make things easier, I have only used a single node, a single machine, and you can deploy a kind of cluster in a single machine. This is just using the multiple threads of a single machine, but you can deploy this in a big cluster of hundreds or thousands of nodes. This is not coming up. This is all right. That's the curse of, live demonstrations, right? Something is not returning. No, but all the other cells are working. Yeah, anyways, this should come up. I have 1 minute left. This will come up, or you will see just another histogram that is actually distributed over multiple files. I will, until this returns, I will go to my conclusions, and then maybe we'll look it back. So yeah, as I said, what I want to show here is how we use the scientific Python ecosystem to analyze particle physics data, how it's used. This is an analysis done completely with using Python libraries, and I listed what I used it there. And we have a big collection of Python libraries found in this scikit-hep repository. But the big message is that we release this big amount of open data, and we really hope to this data to be explored from non-Atlas scientists and embrace on a dialogue with them. So yeah, please go ahead, have a look, rerun this notebook. This notebook should, I gave a Git, it should run itself, and get in touch about that. Yeah, I'm done. I'll just thank, just want to thank our kind of system support to make this run or not make this run. But that's it from me. Thank you. So I'll take another minute to show that actually a plot is going to come up. Yeah. Thank you.
Do we have any questions for Vangelis? Right here. Coming around behind you.
So I'm happy to see when I see people using awkward arrays, because I also have to deal with that at work. I work for also for the National Synchrotron Light Source at Brookhaven National Lab, another accelerator. But in this case, I noticed that there was a section where you save like an empty array when you don't get collisions. Why is it important to save that information?
So it's not when I don't get collisions. In this particular case, is when I don't get the objects that I was interested in from my collision. So in this case, let's say, right? So every row, it's a collision event, let's say, right? And in this particular case, I'm just writing electrons. If I write muons, I'll get something else here. So this row exists and there are data. I'm just looking from the electron side that sometimes is empty, but maybe these rows are filled with muon data, or these rows are filled with other things. That's why, you can look it from a different sort of perspective. It's not an empty row. Yeah.
Other questions for Vangelis?
I think I saw a hand back here.
We'll come around.
Hi. Great talk. So I'm not familiar with these libraries. So I'm wondering if when you wrote coffee, you were expecting it to be used only for the data from the LHC or for any other particle accelerator out there?
So what we are working with coffee is actually, let me find the line. So this line is important. So coffee can be used for kind of data from other accelerators, I think, as well. And what we kind of custom building is these schemas. So this schema tell coffee that now you feed Atlas data, now you feed CMS data, now you feed like your own custom data. So this is what we develop a little bit from the Atlas side in collaboration with coffee. So coffee understands our particular data structure, and then you can develop the schema for sort of different data structures. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Gordon from the University of Washington. I'm one of the authors on this. Coffee fills a really unique spot in our ecosystem. It is a library that's meant to be deleted. We put in, when we don't really know how to do something, but we have to do it, we put it into coffee, and then we get it out, people use it, we figure out actually what is the right approach, and then we pull the code out of coffee and into another library. So the histogram library, for example, is an example of this. It started out in coffee, we figured out what the right way to do it was, and then we pulled things out. So this schema that he was just talking about, for example, is something that within probably the next 6 months will be pulled out of coffee, because now we think we know how to do it. So it's a very odd library in that sense. It's meant to be empty. But it never is. It just gets bigger.
Thanks.
Thanks for a great talk. So I learned recently that you guys have exabytes of data in total for the LHC, which is like thousands of petabytes. And I see here in this example, you're actually looking more like 11 gigabytes of data. So I was wondering if you can talk a bit about, where is the data stored? How do you get it onto your laptop? Does this run in the cloud? Like, do you, process the data in chunks? Like, yeah, can you talk a bit about the scale of the data and how you approach that?
So what we released as an open data is a kind of 100 terabytes of data, right? You cannot download this in your laptop. You can stream this, it's gonna be slow. Or what we use, right, as particle physicists, we use data centers, right? We have data centers across the world in different institutes. I'm currently running in a Chicago data center where we have a kind of big amount of data storage, so we can download some data there. We have multiple nodes, and we can deploy a Dask cluster. The data are local there, and then we can use the local compute infrastructure there. That's the end user level analysis. We do a lot of kind of data processing, which goes very beyond the scope of this talk. Production level kind of data processing. This is run completely distributed in our distributed system called Grid. It's like a cloud infrastructure. But what we actually, analyzers, physicists, they used to use this Grid to do processing, but I think there's a lot of delay, and what we try to do is move towards these technologies where actually you make this compact data format, the FISLite. You can now store the FISLite in your data center in an institute level, and then you can have sort of thousands of compute nodes that you can deploy it, sort of a Dask cluster, let's say, or something similar. And data is there, it's compact, they can fit, and compute is nearby, and you can do this thing. That's a little bit how we imagine the future will be for the next kind of decade or something.
Cool. Thank you so much.
I think we are out of time now, but I do believe Vangelis will be happy to take your questions
Definitely.
in person. So thank you.